Welcome to episode 22A of Successful Demo. In each episode, we analyze the theoretical and practical aspects of one more newly released cards. We are going to put the new in newly released, as we are about to play with cards from, down the right now, the second pack of the Kitara cycle, even before it gets implemented on Jinja.net. And we are going to start this off with a bang as we go with Jinja City Grid. That's right, we are about to see a new vegetable card. Glazebrook fans, unite. Alright, so Jinja City Grid is a card that caught my attention as soon as it was released, and for good reason. Now, one is very tempted to compare this with a similar existing card in dedicated Technician Team, both of which do kind of the same thing in mitigating install costs of ice. And yeah, on the surface that seems like the case. They're both the same to res, and they both give discounts. In fact, Jinja City Grid looks fairly worse. Not only does it cost influence to play out of faction, you also have to draw the ice in order to trigger it, meaning that existing ice in your hand cannot be installed with Jinja City Grid. In addition, you're actually revealing this ice, so you are giving up the face check advantage. All that being said, I think that's the wrong approach to analyze Jinja City Grid. Those are indeed downsides, but they pale in comparison to the upsides of playing this card. Now, first we talk about the raw efficiency of it. While it does save credits as with dedicated Technician Team, which sees basically no play, the very, very important aspect that isn't immediately obvious at first sight is that Jinja City Grid actually saves clicks. And whenever something allows you to gain extra clicks or save clicks, you have to pay attention to it, because that is potentially a very game-changing effect, and I believe that is the case for Jinja City Grid. We've seen the power of click compression in existing HB cards, and Jinja City Grid adds yet another powerful, efficient tool to HB's already powerful toolbox. We also note that this saves a whole lot of credits, unlike dedicated Technician Team, which only saves 2 credits. For Jinja City Grid, it basically negates the install cost for the first 5 ice on the server. That is absolutely ridiculous. In most normal games, you will never see 5 ice on a single server. With Jinja City Grid, this is absolutely possible. In fact, this makes it such that constructing a server with 5 ice in it is very easy, and a lot of runners, because they're not used to seeing 5 ice on a server, are not well prepared to deal with it. And it comes at a very low cost. Normally having to build a 5 ice server is terrible for the co-op, because you would have to incur the install costs of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10 credits, and the 5 click cost of installing 5 different ice. With Jinja City Grid, all that is negated. You save 5 clicks and 10 credits. That is no paltry sum. The only opportunity cost to installing ice with Jinja City Grid is that these ice are not on your other servers. Assuming you're building a scoring remote with Jinja Grid, that means these 5 ice are not in your centrals. You might lose to central pressure, but that's again something that you can deal with. In fact, the advantages don't stop there. The biggest problem with Jinja City Grid is that there are hardly any answers in the runner card pool for this effect. You can't really stop Jinja City Grid short of, say, a political operative, or maybe even something so niche like unscheduled maintenance. So you have to play around Jinja City Grid by good in-game gameplay, which is also very difficult. If you decide to contest Jinja City Grid by trashing it off centrals, you are losing out, because it's a humongous 5 trash costs. You are losing even if you deny the Jinja City Grid, because you'll be broke. It's also 1 to res, meaning that as the co-op, it pays off immediately, making it a very easy to cash in on this Jinja City Grid. This is compounded by the fact that it has a whenever trigger rather than, say, a once per turn. Because this way, using your 3 clicks as the co-op, you can install Jinja City Grid click 1, and then draw a bunch of cards and immediately begin protecting it. And what better way to draw extra cards than to use the clearances in faction? The clearances with Jinja City Grid are what turn this card from really good into bonkers, in my opinion, because these cards synergize incredibly well with each other, covering each other's downsides. The downside of playing ultraviolet and violet level clearance is that your hand will be flooded, meaning that you have, and your turn will end, meaning that you have to discard a lot of cards from your hand, and leave HQ more vulnerable as it is stacked with agendas. Well, Jinja City Grid negates that because you can install your ice as you draw them, so you won't end up having to discard these ice and making them blank cards essentially. On the other hand, the clearances also cover Jinja City Grid because by providing these ice to defend the Jinja City Grid, these clearances protect the Jinja City Grid from the runner running it and trashing it, meaning that it will stay online for future turns to come, allowing you to build that disgusting 5 ice server, or maybe even more ice. So yeah, this is absolutely insane, and we're going to abuse that to make what I would call a semi-rush glacier deck. They are kind of contradictory terms because glacier decks tend to go for the late game and rush decks tend to win early, but we are shooting for the mid game win here with Arthur Group and Jinja City Grid. Now we are going to, this deck I feel is really good as it is. At a base power level, I think Jinja City Grid just provides so much efficiency to this deck that it's really powerful as it is, and it's not even optimized in my opinion. So because of this, I'm just going to explain basically all the cards in this deck, so you have an idea of how this deck synergizes well with itself. We start off with the money. This is entirely operation-based economy, which seems excessive at first glance. We are playing 14 operation economy cards, but you ask, well, if Jinja City Grid is saving you that all the install cost of ice, do you really need that much econ? And the answer is heck yeah, because these ice are not cheap to res at all. And if you are going to rush for a victory, you won't see all your operation economy cards. So you want to have as many of them in your deck as possible. Trust me, you are going to go broke very quickly, and nothing's worse than building a 5 ice server with Jinja City Grid only to realize you can only afford to res 1 or 2 of those ice. We also support these operations with the one-off Brian Stinson. Fun fact, all 14 operations that we're running are all transactions. So every single one of them is eligible as a Brian Stinson trigger. It fits perfectly in this deck. Speaking of upgrades, the remainder of our upgrades are Jinja City Grid obviously, and a bunch of defensive upgrades. We want to play Crisium Grid because, as I mentioned, focusing too many ice on the Jinja remote leaves you vulnerable on central, so Crisium Grid seems like an obvious include. We also don't want to lose to runners who break ice very well. Smoke is a very good example of that, so we have some remote upgrades as well to slow down the runner and to protect our agendas as we score them. By the way, there's no fast advance in this deck, no biotic labor, no MC austerity policy, so we are scoring agendas the hard way. We are telegraphing all of them. We are just relying on sheer brute force, sheer good numbers and efficiency with Jinja City Grid, or expensive taxing ice, and the remote defensive upgrades. So this is why we need these upgrades. Because we are running these upgrades, we can afford to use Arthur Group as our identity. Initially, I built this in Architects of Tomorrow. As you can see, most of the influence I'm spending on this deck is rather, weak influence expenditures. None of them are essential cards. So Architects makes sense since you don't really need the 15 influence. But I realized that there are not enough good Bioroids to justify playing Architects of Tomorrow. Hence, I decided on Arthur Group instead, which makes things efficient because you can install, for example, you can install Ash or Marcus Betty while getting triggers of your ice on your remote, or you can install Crisium on the central and then immediately fortify it with ice. Arthur Group will only trigger a couple times during the entire game, but every click save counts, especially when you are saving a lot of clicks as it is with Jinja City Grid. Speaking of the Jinja Grid, we are playing localized product line at an expensive 3 influence. Trust me, it's worth it because 3 Jinja City Grids are not enough. If I could, I would definitely run 5 or 6 copies of Jinja Grid in this deck. Localized product line means that we can expect more consistency. We should be able to see a Jinja Grid relatively early with essentially 4 copies of it in our deck. The best part is localized product line synergizes very well with violet level clearance. One of the most powerful turns you can take is localized product line for Jinja City Grid, click 1, install Jinja, click 2, and play violet level, click 3, triggering, and if you draw any ice off the violet level, well, you immediately install it with Jinja City Grid, and it's protected very nicely. So you don't have to worry about the runner trashing your Jinja Grid because localized product line cannot be trashed. it's not an upgrade. So yeah, really awesome stuff to make this deck more consistent. Jinja Grid is such a bedrock of this deck that I'm willing to fork out 3 influence just to increase the consistency of seeing it early. Jinja Grid is pretty useless late game, so there you go. Next up, we have the ice. I selected the best ice, basically the most taxing ice that is available in faction. For a simple reason, again, as we mentioned, Jinja Grid reviews the ice, so you don't really need the face check potential. What you want is taxing ice. Ice that is cheap to res, expensive to break. HB is very good at that, and I made sure to include at least 1 ice of each subtype that are must breaks for the runners. Obviously, Satyr and Threshold 3 are must breaks because they have end the run, and Architect as the sentry must break is very crucial because if the runner doesn't break the Architect, I simply install a Marcus Betty or Ash with the Architect, making it nigh impossible for the runner to contest the agenda in the remote. So yep, that's the ice, that's very powerful. We also spend our remaining influence on Miraju. This was initially Wampoa Reclamation. Reasoning behind that is that you will definitely be flooded with agendas in HQ. This is a big weakness of this deck as you are drawing lots of cards with the clearances and probably can't score that early. Miraju solves that by allowing you to shuffle these agendas back into R&D should the runner run your hand. Additionally, it provides indexing resistance and is all around a pretty good card because it's an ice, meaning that it's installable with Jinja City Grid as well. Even if you're not planning to res it at all on your remote, it serves as an extra ice to gain strength for Satyr Adaptive Barrier. Oh, did I mention how good Satyr Adaptive Barrier is in conjunction with Jinja Grid? Yeah, those two are a match made in heaven. Finally, very curious agenda in Advanced Concept Hopper. This agenda was more than superseded when Corporate Sales Team was released, but since we're already running 3 copies of the Sales Team, might as well place the Hopper as our last 4-2 agenda. And it actually synergizes very nicely with Jinja City Grid. One interaction that not many people actually observe is that imagine the runner is making a run on your remote. It seems like a fairly innocuous remote, only a Threshold 3, guarding what seems to be an agenda, but you have a Advanced Concept Hopper scored. So when the runner initiates the run, you trigger your ability to draw a card, and the card you happen to draw is Architect. Well, assuming you have a Jinja Grid in the server, you can then immediately toss the Architect on that server, and the runner is forced to approach and encounter it because it's the first ice. So suddenly the runner's encountering an Architect they didn't expect to be encountering during the run, which is absolutely insane. Of course, this is really janky. It relies on you having the Hopper scored as it is, and relies on you drawing the correct ice on the Advanced Concept Hopper trigger. But it's an amazing combo if you actually manage to pull it off. It just happens too infrequently that it's not worth running 3 copies of the Advanced Concept Hopper. So Corporate Sales Team's a lot more consistent, which is why that is the 3-off agenda instead. And just so in case y'all are dubious about this is why I asked this question on Reddit, and it ended up getting included in the unofficial FAQ, and they did confirm that the runner is indeed forced to approach the newly installed ice with Advanced Concept Hopper and Jinja City Grid. So that's the deck, and we are going to go into a series of matches against James Gray playing regular Valencia. This is going to be a 3-game match, so I hope you enjoy all these games. And for those astute viewers out there, this is why this video was named 22A. This is gonna be split into multiple parts because 3 games is too many to fit in a video. So it's time to enjoy the power of the Jinja Grid. Due to how incredibly awesome Jinja Grid is, it is not unreasonable to mulligan for a Jinja Grid or a localized product line. However, we stick with this hand. We take it. It has an opening hedge fund, which you can never complain about. It has at least 1 ice, which you can put on HQ. And most importantly, you have the violet level clearance, which draws you probably into your Jinja Grid. So it is actually quite important to ice HQ, even though this is intended to be a rush deck, because you never want to play violet level clearance with an open HQ. That is asking for a lot of trouble. So here the big question with my turn 1 is, do I play the Fairchild 3 on R&D? Fairchild 2 is definitely going on HQ, that's for sure. It's a nasty face check, and yeah, that's good. The problem is Fairchild 3 is a very valuable ender run that would have a lot of good use on my remote. Here I decide to ice R&D because I would think that there are more good things coming in my deck, more good ice for my remote, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm more worried about indexing, hence Fairchild 3 on R&D. And sure enough, Fairchild 3 appears on our R&D. So my second Fairchild 3 gets installed on my remote with the Ash using the Asa trigger, and then I get my Violet level off, drawing into a whole bunch of agendas. This is not looking good. It's usually okay to be flooded if you have a lot of ice to protect your remote with, and I do draw into, I think that's a Fairchild 1. So I guess it's time to score an agenda. I also have a lateral growth here, so I can actually gain a lot of money. You see how the lateral growth and all the 14 operation economy cards come into play here. Lateral growth into Hopper and install ice on the remote using Asa. Click 2 is advance the agenda, and click 3 was IPO. So the click compression from Asa there allowing me to get the agenda advance as I defend it with another piece of ice and still able to advance it and play the IPO. Scoring in the next turn, I'm on a relatively healthy credit level. I don't have to worry about central pressure because I have enough money to threaten all my ice. And I get the Hopper squad, so this should be pretty interesting. Unfortunately, I still haven't found my Jinja grid. Instead, I find a Chrysium grid. I guess that's somewhat useful. I could install the Chrysium grid here and trigger Asa install off Itchy, but instead, I'm going to go full rush here. I'm going to install the Vitruvius in the remote. This is very difficult for my opponent to bring themselves to contest because this could be a defensive upgrade. They are going to waste a lot of energy running this remote if it turns out not to be an agenda. So they run my archives here, and again, Hopper trigger. They ran archives because obviously they were going for a mining accident. So at this point, I'm actually kind of boned because I've already given my opponent one bad pup from one of the mining accidents. I'm going to give them yet another. The reasoning here is that I should be able to rush out the win with elective upgrade and the turn after. Right now, I'm going to score this Vitruvius to bring me up to 4 points. Next turn, I should be able to jam double advance the elective upgrade to win me the game. Unfortunately, I'm looking at my opponent's bin and they seem to have found their paperclip, so this is a problem. And they're starting to pressure HQ as well. So, first thing, advanced concept Hopper triggers, I gain a credit and I res the Fairchild 2. They can't click through it, they are forced to install their Black Orchestra here. The problem with this is that they have both the breakers necessary to get through my remote. The remote is, I believe, Fairchild 1 into Fairchild 3, and even if I install a Seder on the remote, I'm not going to be able to score the elective upgrade safely because they have a paperclip in the bin. So this is a very tricky situation to be in. I'm forced to slow down against a Valencia with 3 total bad publicity. Yikes. So this is where I really need to just start constructing a bunch of ice on my remote, but I haven't drawn my Jinja grid yet. Right now, I'm down to 29 cards in R&D. I've drawn through 40% of my deck. The chances of not seeing any of my 4 Jinja grids is about 12%. So this is quite an unlucky game, but we have to take these games into account. We need to know how to play around it. I do have some bait. I could use the sales team to bait my opponent into the remote, forcing them to spend lots of money to break the ice and then drop the elective upgrade as a follow-up. So here I'm going to play Hedge Fund. I'm going to play the sales team, get the Asa trigger on the Seder Adaptive Barrier, which will force the paperclip install. Except I realized that my ID has been disabled. Bloody hell, they played Employee Strike. I was sitting there looking so confused. I was like, wait, why can't I install my Seder? Oh, crap. That changes everything because I expected to advance my agenda there. So I can't advance my agenda here. It's way too easy to steal. So I'm just going to play the Seder normally. Stupid Employee Strike. You know, Asa Group is a really good ID ability, and being denied it sucks. Now my opponent plays Stim Hack here. Do I res the ice? Tough choice. They have 12 free credits for this run. I decided that it was not worth it. For obvious reasons. Installing a paperclip, breaking the Fairchild, breaking the Seder is going to be so cheap. I mean, it's just going to use the Stim Hack credits and Bad Pub credits. So there was no point defending the sales team. I'm just happy that I got one Stim Hack out of the way. Unfortunately, I can't jam the elective upgrade this turn. It's still, you know, not well defended enough. But I don't even get a chance to jam it because my opponent smartly Omars into HQ and snipes the 1 in 3 elective upgrade, putting them on match point. It's now 4-5 in their favor, and we are in big trouble. I cannot score a 5-3 agenda without telegraphing it, and it's very easy for them to run the telegraph agenda and auto win the game. So I just keep going forward with a forward momentum card like Ultraviolet Clearance, which draws me into an elective upgrade. This is looking really bad. If my opponent decides to run that remote, I auto lose. Hopefully they don't run the face down. Instead, they are pressuring Centrals right now, knowing that all they need is one good snipe on HQ or R&D to win. They get the turning wheel counter on R&D. So one good thing about this semi-rush deck is you can draw through R&D easily with your clearances, but without the Jinja grid, I simply have no out on my remote. My opponent can easily just hold back the second Stim Hack, wait for me to advance the elective upgrade, and then swoop in for the win. I really had no chance here. Yeah, and with my Ash in the bin and no way to recur it, my only other out was Marcus Batty, which doesn't really help against Anarch. So at this point, I just decided to concede because it would only be a matter of time before my opponent either accumulates enough Omar triggers and turning wheel counters to win off Centrals, or goes for the remote snipe for the win. With defensive upgrades being somewhat lackluster in the current meta, this deck really relies on constructing a ginormous remote of lots of ice in order to keep the runner out. I wasn't able to do that because I did not draw any of my 4 Jinja City grids up to the point I conceded. Therefore, my mistake this game was not drawing my Jinja City grid. I will try my best in subsequent games to draw the Jinja City grid. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching and happy net running. Goodbye.